What's happening, Hardscapers? Today we're going to talk about 3 reasons why your pavers are sinking. Let's get into this. There are 3 reasons why your pavers are sinking, and we're going to provide solutions to that. Unfortunately, they are not great solutions. They're going to cause a lot of labor to be able to fix it, to be able to remedy it, but at least you'll have some sort of solution moving forward with your sinking pavers. But at least an interlocking pavement system is beneficial in that you can fix it and you can still reuse the product. If this was something like asphalt or concrete, you'd have cracks and you'd have to replace certain sections, or maybe even the entire project. So that's the benefit of having pavers. So let's get into these 3 reasons. Number 1, the settling of the subsoil. Once we excavate for our base material, we then have our subsoil. This should be our native subsoil, some sort of clay, sandy, silt material that we are building on top of. Now, when the project was built and the whole entire organic material was not removed and you didn't get down to that subsoil, that's likely the cause of your sinking. But when it comes to the actual subsoil settling, this is because the proper compaction method was not applied, or there was no compaction applied to that subsoil. Or it was a new build area and we just weren't able to get that proper compaction rate, especially up against the foundation, which is typically what we usually see. A patio starting to sink towards the foundation within that 3-foot area of the foundation, and you start to get pooling along that foundation, so that area needs to be picked up and re-lifted. And that's just because over time subsoil will begin to settle, and especially with those new builds where it's just recently put in, it is really difficult to get that proper compaction up against the foundation. So a lot of people say don't build up against the foundation with steps. You have to, obviously, but there's ways we can mitigate that. But with a patio, leave that area. You're not even going to use that area anyways in your patio up against that foundation. Instead, use it as some sort of planting or decorative aggregate mulch along that area. That way, if it settles, it's not a big deal. If it is a patio and it does settle, you'll have a little bit more fixing to go along with that. But not only around the foundation, but also those hard to get spaces. That's why you'll see it around things like pillars, where pavers start to sink towards those pillars, or different structures where it's just difficult to get a compactor right up against that sort of structure to get the proper compaction that's necessary there. So what we do with our subsoil is we lay down a layer of 3/4 inch clear stone and we compact that into our clay especially, and then we'll sprinkle in some Portland cement, and that'll help bring out the moisture in that clay subsoil and dry things up a bit, and then we can start to build on top of that. Which brings me to point number 2 as to why your pavers are sinking, and that's because of the settling of your base material. Now, to prevent this, we'd use the proper compaction methods. Much like the compaction of our subsoil, we'll use a similar compaction method, though with our subsoil, we're going to use some sort of ramming impact compactor. And in terms of our base material, which is more granular, we're going to use a vibratory compactor. And now maybe with your project, you didn't get the right compaction level. Rule of thumb is for every 1,000 pounds of centrifugal force from your plate compactor is every 1 inch of material that you should be compacting. So with those small little compactors, you're really looking at about like 1 inch of compaction. It's very minimal. That's why you want to get a larger compactor if possible for your project to get upwards of at least that 3-inch, 4-inch mark. Compaction is not something that you want to skimp out on. It's something that you want to spend time on with it. Within this reason of settling your base, sometimes you prepare your base and it's not uniform. You get those waves, especially when you're compacting. You want your base to mimic the surface of the pavement, especially as you compact it. There is some minor tolerance in there, but aim for as best as you can with this. Another thing that you can do to mitigate this is install geotextile. This will not only separate your base material from your subsoil, but it'll also bridge over that subsoil if it is to settle in the future at some point in time. You'll have a little bit of stabilization with that geotextile, especially if we're talking woven geotextile. Now, if we're talking non-woven geotextile, which is more of a separator rather than an added reinforcement or stability, we're going to add biaxial geogrid on top of that. And really about halfway in our base, if we're not adding it at the bottom of our base, we're going to add it somewhere in the middle of our base. And what this biaxial geogrid does is it stabilizes the base material that's placed on top of it by locking in the aggregates into the apertures or the openings of that geogrid. And once again, it's going to stabilize the base material that's placed on top of it and spread that load out over a wider area that pavement experiences. And each of these things is going to help you prevent the settling of that base material, which brings us to point number 3, why your pavers are sinking is because of the improper base depth. So if it's a patio, 6 to 8 inches, we are in Toronto, freeze-thaw cycle to compare for those living in southern states. You may need a little bit less of base material. With a driveway, we're going 12 to 14 inches as a minimum. So if you prepare your driveway with a 6 to 8 inch base, you'll definitely get some settling. We need more base depth for the load that pavement is going to carry to be able to spread that load out over a wider area and provide more drainage below that pavement. And in addition to that, we need to follow steps number 1 and 2, compacting our subsoil, as well as being able to install a geotextile, a geogrid, and proper compaction of that base material, especially in a driveway application, which is going to experience a vehicular traffic on top. And if you stuck around to the end, a 4th and final bonus one that we've got here for you, and that is probably the least likely, but still possible, is washout. And this we see more so with raised patios or along the edges of a paver project where you experience washout of that aggregate and those pavers start to sink or settle or slope away from the project entirely. And you'll especially see this with more dense graded base materials. Dense graded meaning they've got fines in it, so less angular, and those fines start to work their way out of that system, especially in a raised patio. If the wall units start to move away from each other, that sandy fine material starts to wash through it, especially if a geotextile wasn't used in that scenario. And along the edges of paver walkways, sometimes that fine material works its way out of that system and those pavers start to slope. That's why we'd like open graded base. It's angular, it's crushed, there's no fines in it, so it's least likely to actually wash out of our system, especially with the use of geotextile in our systems. And for the solutions, we deal with this a lot in my business. As you may know if you follow this channel, I do lift and relays a lot. This is where we come in, pick up pavers, redo the base or the bedding material, put the pavers back down. And for these solutions, unfortunately, they come with a lot of labor. The first easiest solution would be to pick up the pavers, compact, put the pavers back down. Now, in this case, you're hoping, especially if you didn't do the project or you didn't see the project done, that the subsoil was compacted properly, geotextile was used, maybe even some geogrid, but more than likely, this is not the case. If those steps were followed, you probably wouldn't be having this big of an issue. So in this case, what we tell people is that however long that project has been there, for however long those pavers have been sinking for, that's probably how much more time you're gonna have left in that project before the pavers start to sink again. For example, if the project's 3 years old, you started to see it sink last year, that's 2 years from the time the project was completed to the time you started to see the pavers start to sink. And now after 3 years, you're gonna take action. If you follow this step of lifting the pavers, compacting, putting the pavers back down, you'll probably get another 2 years out of it. And maybe just a little bit more because the pavers have already settled a little bit there, so you at least have that compaction going for you. And then the even bigger project would be to actually take those pavers out along with the base material, excavate all of that, compact the subsoil properly, put that geotextile in, that base material, that geogrid, and at that point you've got a completely new project. So it's up to you if you want to reuse the pavers or maybe even just replace the pavers for $5 a square foot more, you get a brand new project there. Not an ideal fix, but it is a fix nonetheless. And those are our 3 reasons why your pavers are sinking. If you have any questions, comments, leave them in the comment section below. I'll respond to anybody and everybody. Like this video if you found it helpful for whatever reason, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more hardscaping content like this. Thank you so much for watching.